Should we have everyone go get a cappuccino first?
This is a tough task. It's the last one. We're the last ones to go. Try to keep awake. If you're falling asleep, just clap your hands and we'll keep it moving. First off, I know Lloyd joins me. It's been a great pleasure to be here the last few days. We always love coming here. We love coming to Israel. It's especially special being in Jerusalem. And I know we want to give our thanks to Avi and everybody, Shira, everybody at Keshet. So thank you very much. This has been billed as a bit of a final fireside chat. And we thought, Avi and I thought it would be an interesting idea to talk with Lloyd about where we are in the television media business today, because Lloyd brings a very special perspective on our business. My work has been 95% in television, and Lloyd has spanned over a long career with many years to come, hopefully.
That wasn't necessary. You didn't have to.
He's been a lawyer, where among his clients was a young comic named Larry David. He was part of a very successful management production company where they did and developed a show called The Sopranos. He then transitioned to becoming a network executive and was the president and ultimately the chairman of ABC. And I like to joke with him all the time because we did a lot of business in those days. But Lloyd joined ABC at a very low point in ABC when there was hardly a heartbeat. And they had, I think their most successful show at the time was a non-scripted show called How to Be a Millionaire. And then they had Alias on the air. That was pretty much it, right? And
it was a little thin.
It was a little thin. But then somehow he is credited for coming up with the idea to do Lost, which really revitalized ABC and put it on its footing, pretty much to where it is today. We'll talk about that eventually, kind of how we did that. But then Lloyd transitioned from ABC to the new media world in Yahoo, which was a very big step for an executive who ultimately was a traditional media executive and then was one of the first traditional media executives to move into the digital world. So we'll talk about that. And now in his new role as co-owner with Gail Berman of the Braun company, where they go between, which is truly a very contemporary company, one of the only ones, probably the only one I can think of that does both traditional and new media. So before we get into the weeds, yesterday we saw, I think when there was the beginning of the conference and Avi showed a little tape maybe before Ari spoke, and we saw a clip of Seinfeld and the famous Lloyd Braun. Not Lloyd, Lloyd Braun. So perhaps you could tell everybody the story. How did that come about? Lloyd Braun.
I lost a golf bet to Larry David. We, as Ari mentioned, we all play golf together at the same club. Rick and Ari and Larry and I and some other friends. And without telling too much out of school, if Larry isn't playing well, sometimes maybe he may not finish. And
gets a little utsy.
He may get a little utsy. You try to say to him, "Hey, Larry, it's a beautiful day out." Huh? He doesn't care. And that particular day, I happened to be playing very well, rare. And he was going to leave. And I said, "You can't leave. I'm like shooting one of my best scores. You can't leave." He goes, "Well, I can't stay. This is torture." And I said, "Well, then let's bet." And he goes, "What do you want to bet?" I said, "We'll bet dinner for 4 anywhere in L.A." He goes, "How's that a good bet for me? I have enough money to pay for dinner. How's that good for me?" And I'm like, "Okay, fine. What do you want to do?" And he goes, "If I win, I get to do anything I want with you on the show." I'm like, "Fine. He's not going to beat me." And Rick will attest, on the 18th hole, I hit the ball out of bounds, which is virtually off the tee, which is almost impossible to do. And I lose. And I don't hear from him for months. And normally he doesn't remember something like this for 10 minutes, no less 6 months. And I'm in my office one day, and the phone rings, and it's him. And he goes, so I was told I should call you to let you know that you're in the show tonight. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, the bet, your name, you're in the show. And I'm go, well, why are you calling and telling me? Well, you know, I want to make sure you don't have a problem with it. I said, well, what if I have when do you shoot it? He goes, in an hour. I said, well, what if I have a problem with it? I don't really know. It's a problem if you have a problem with it. And so I said, well, how often is my name in the show? He goes, it's in there a few times. I said, well, who's playing me? Oh, he's very handsome. He's a handsome man. You're going to love him. He's a very handsome man. So the reason it's always Lloyd Braun is he's sticking it to me every time. It's him sort of, Lloyd Braun. And then what happens in these shows, you know, it's only going to be one episode, but the writers like the character. So the next thing you know, there's 3 episodes of this, and I can't go to an airport without a TSA official looking at my license and saying, yes, it's me. Yes. Okay, that's the Seinfeld story.
No royalty.
Not a penny.
Not a penny.
Not a penny. You'd think my agent would work on that.
You would think.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Lloyd, let's talk about the ABC days. Seriously, you know, they were hard. You were under an enormous amount of pressure. And I remember those days. I mean, you were under a lot of pressure from Bob Iger and from Michael Eisner. The network was really struggling. And as everybody probably knows, you know, the networks are, you know, make their money from advertising. And if the ratings are bad, advertising rates are low. And, you know, earnings for Disney are affected. And it just creates an enormous amount of pressure. So why don't you talk about kind of those early days and what you were working with, and then we can transition to happier days.
Well, the thing about networks in America are they all have a disproportionate impact on the perception of the parent company. Even though they may bring in only a fraction. For instance, at NBC, most of the revenue in the NBC Universal Group comes from cable, but all Jeff Zucker would ever hear about every day is network prime time. And because it is what everyone writes about and has such a perception, you have everybody pays attention very closely, and you're under a microscope. And the thing, first of all, while they were tough times, I have to say they were also great times, because it's one of those positions where you learn an awful lot in almost every imaginable area. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other people. I often say that those jobs will bring out the worst character defects a person has. If you are insecure, when you get that job, you're 100 times more insecure. If you're an egomaniac, when you get that job, you're 100 times more of an egomaniac. And so maintaining your equilibrium and your balance is a very important thing, and you have to have a lot of discipline in those jobs. What it also teaches you how to be a leader, and when you're going through tough times, what you try to do is tell yourself and tell the people around you that it's a great opportunity. I remember once getting everybody together in the hall. This was my last year there, and giving an impromptu speech to everybody about how, you know, this was the best time you could possibly be at a network like this, because when you are in the cellar is when typically you will finally take chances. And because there's all sorts of forces and pressures that are always operating to prevent you from taking big swings. You know, everybody wants law shows. Everyone wants medical shows. Everybody wants police shows. Those are sort of the 3 franchises. And if you come up with a franchise that's not one of those 3, there's all sorts of pressures coming from sales and scheduling and marketing and every other imaginable constituency telling you not to do it.
Let me interject here for a second. So you would also, I assume, feel pressure by certain people in your management when they would see a successful show on another network. And maybe you passed on that pitch, or maybe you didn't, or maybe you tried to get it and you didn't, or maybe they didn't pitch it to you. And you would get the question, why not us? And you have to deal with that.
Why not us? But actually, Rick, the thing that made me the most crazy is if something worked on another network and it would come up, well, we need to do that now. We have to do one of those. I'm like, but someone just did it.
Right.
I mean, it's like the example I used to give was when, you remember the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood? So there hadn't been a Western that had been a hit for ages in the movie business. And that movie becomes a huge hit. And the next thing you know, there's like 5 Westerns out in the next 2 years. And they're all bad, and none of them do any business. And I would say to everybody, I said, what made these executives think that everybody wanted Westerns? They wanted a good movie. And Unforgiven was a good movie that happened to be a Western. And once that itch is scratched, it becomes that much harder now. The last thing you should want to do is another Western, unless there's something unique about it. I give my partner, Gail Berman, enormous credit. She did a show called House. And we had all, we've all done every imaginable medical show. And the reason Gail did House was because it was a completely different way of looking at a medical franchise with a lead character that no one had ever seen before. A brilliant, mean, disabled, quasi-psychotic character. And if you went by the television handbook, and Gail would tell me stories on how often she would hear, oh, you can't have a lead character like that. He's not likable. You have to have your lead characters likable. Really? J.R. Ewing's likable? I mean, we can go on and on and on. I don't buy any of that. And so the pressure to repeat somebody else's success is very, very significant. It still is. When I believe the reality is, when everybody else is zigging is when you have to zag. And the hardest thing is to find a fresh, new idea. And that's really what we're always looking for.
Okay, so let's get into that. So now you're in some dark days, and you're thinking about, I've got to find something new. And you have under contract to you J.J. Abrams, who had done the show Alias.
Yeah, but his agent said he wasn't going to do another show for that.
That's a longer story for a different panel. So Alias was what would you call it, a modest success?
Yeah, Alias was a terrific show, but it wasn't a breakout hit.
Right.
We needed a breakout hit. When you are in the cellar, a single or a double, and maybe Alias, which I love as a show, was a double, you need a home run, because you see now what that's done for NBC with The Voice. You have a show that is twice the rating of everything else. It changes the entire network. And we had some singles and doubles, but we hadn't had any home runs.
So take us through the story of Lost. Take us through the genesis of that, because it was fairly unconventional, actually.
Yes, actually, I don't even know if you know this first part. I had the title Lost before I had anything else. Do you know where the title Lost came from, Ricky?
No.
Okay. Your client, Conan, by the way, you can never ask me for money for this. That's the rule.
Not outside the country.
In Israel, you can't ask for anything. Ask. At home, it's another matter.
Different story.
Conan had a show years ago, an unscripted reality show called Lost. Do you remember this?
I remember him talking about it.
Okay, so it might have been before you represented him.
It was.
And
if it wasn't, there'd been a different story.
So there's another agent. Maybe it's Gavin. I owe Gavin money. And it had something to do with people being thrown somewhere in the world, and they had to find their way home. And I'm watching this show, and I see the title. I'm like, oh, that's the best title for a show ever. I can't believe I didn't think of a title like that. Forget I don't have a show. I can't believe I didn't think of that title. And, you kind of log it away. And when that show was canceled, I had read it was canceled, and I said to myself, ooh, I can use that title now. I'm going to use that title one day. And then you kind of store it away. And A couple of years later, I'm in Hawaii with my wife, who's here, and our 4 kids, and we always went to this place, the Mauna Kea Beach Hotel in Hawaii, on the Big Island, Hawaii, which has got the most beautiful beach in Hawaii. And my wife and is sometimes a little late. And I'm sorry.
Jewish.
But here, by the way, that was a good thing. Jewish woman. She looks good when she comes down, but she's a little late. And so the sun was setting, and I decide I'm going to go to the beach to see the sun, and my kids aren't down there yet either, so I'm sitting on the beach waiting for this. We're going to go to this clam bake, and the movie Castaway was on the night before, and it was actually airing on ABC, and I was watching some of it before I went to sleep. And so I'm sitting on the beach, and I have a drink, and the sun is setting, and I'm thinking about Castaway, and I'm like, God, I wish I could do a series on Castaway. At that point, I was thinking of any possible idea that was a big, larger-than-life idea that wasn't a medical show, police show, or a law show. And I'm like, well, how do you do a show about a guy and a volleyball, and there's no one on the island, and that doesn't sound like a hit show. And then the notion of Survivor came to my head, and I said, well, what if you marry sort of Survivor and Castaway, and a plane crashes, and no one knew each other, and they all end up on this island, and they have to sort of form a society. It's kind of like a little Lord of the Flies, and they've got to figure out how to get off, and people can take on different identities, and oh my God, I can use my title. I can use Lost. And at that moment, my wife and kids come down, and I keep an idea inside for about 10 seconds. And I go, I have an idea for a show, and I pitch it to them. And history's been rewritten a little bit, but I don't remember there being an overwhelming reaction. And anyway, I file it away, and about 2-3 weeks later, I'm back in Los Angeles, and we were having a retreat where we had all the executives from ABC, from the television studio. We had about 100 people there, and we had given out an assignment that everybody had to pitch one show at this retreat. And Michael Eisner was there, Bob Iger was there, they had to pitch shows. And it's coming around to me, and I had some incredibly lame show that was kind of based on the movie The Sting. It was bad. And it's coming to me, and I'm like, oh, am I really going to pitch this lame show that is like, oh, I like Lost. I'm gonna pitch that. What the heck? And it gets to me, and I pitch it, and silence. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And I make some joke, and it continues going, and I'm like, well, that was like a disaster. And my head of drama, a guy named Tom Sherman, who now actually runs programming for the CW, comes over to me afterwards and goes, Lloyd, I kind of like that idea. I'm like, oh, my God, you do? He goes, yeah, I really think there's something there. Well, I said, well, I really like it too, but, I mean, honestly, Tom, it's like you and me. He goes, I like it. I said, well, wait a minute. You run drama, right? I supposedly run the whole thing. This is exactly what happened. I said, let's do it, but let's just you and me. Let's not make a whole thing of it. There's no reason to publicize it. We'll just very quietly do this.
No big Megillah.
No, let's not. There's no reason to upset people. And that literally started the process. And from that moment on, that was the piece of development that I was obsessed with all year long. And when the first script finally came in over Christmas and I read it, it was horrible. It was everything that everyone was worried about. And I was so dejected. And I don't know if Jim Jackaway is still here, but he represents J.J. Abrams. That's when I decided, and it was already very, very late, and we had picked up every pilot already, and that's when I said, I'm going to call J.J. Abrams and have him come in and see if he can take this thing and start from scratch. And I brought him in, and we then brought in Damon Lindelof, and to make a long story short, they ended up writing a phenomenal outline. I ordered the show with my partner, Susan Line, who was a terrific partner and very supportive. We ended up ordering the show off of this outline. which was not a very popular thing for us to do. But again, from where we were, you take chance. I mean, a million years I wouldn't have done something like that if we were riding high. But you are forced to do things and take chances that you otherwise would not take. And those guys made Lost what it was. I mean, they're the ones that Damon and JJ came up with the flashbacks. Damon and JJ came up with, they came to me one day and said, well, when they said they'd do it, they said, we'll do it, but there's one big thing we want to change, and we don't think you're going to like it. I said, well, what? We think there has to be something wrong with the island. I'm like, okay, well, like what? Well, at that point, it was going to be, the island was going to be a military experimental island. Of course, everything ended up changing, as it always does with series. And I actually love that idea, and that's what got it going. And these things are miracles.
We didn't see that in the pilot, but just one thing that I think would be interesting for the audience is, because we were talking in the last panel, talked about scale, and Giddy and Ron, and we're talking about the cost of shows, right? So we remember that pilot. That's why I bring it up. So we remember that pilot with the big plane crash. I mean, when everyone saw that pilot, it was extraordinary. It was like a major film. Tell everybody how much that pilot cost. One episode.
The budget was close to $14 million. JJ brought it in under budget. It was brought in for about 13. I don't know, Jim, are you here?
There he is.
What was it, 13, 12? 12 and change. So I think it was like $1 million under budget. But here's the thing. Here's the mistake people make. It's not about what these things cost. You have to look at what does the entire P&L look like. And we actually had less risk on Lost with its $12.5 million budget than we did on any one-hour pilot. Now, how is that possible? Well, because the budget was so high, we decided we had to make it as a 2-hour. If we made it as a 2-hour, it meant even if the series never got ordered, it would have to air, which meant that we could sell it internationally, and we were going to get a lot of money in for that. So that offsets. Typically, when your pilot doesn't air, and this I think is a crazy old vestige of the television business that still exists and is going to have to change, those 1-hour pilots in the garbage. They never see the light of day. So this was going to air. We ended up shooting it in Hawaii because we had huge tax credits. We found an old beat-up L-1011 that we cut up into pieces and put on a barge and shipped to Hawaii. So the plane didn't cost us much. And at the end of the day, if this show did not go forward, we actually had a lot of that covered. But when the price is published at $13 million, people are like, oh my God, this is crazy. I have to say, this was an example where we had people at the network like Mark Pedowitz and Jim Hedges, guys you don't hear about typically, who run finance, who run business affairs, where it wasn't like, you can't do this, Lloyd. It was, okay, let's figure out how we can get this done, knowing the reality of everything. How do we get it done? And it's a very rare thing where people really sort of get together to try to figure it out as opposed to tell you all the reasons why you can't do it. And you can figure it out in a way that that economically makes sense.
So now you have this incredibly expensive investment that gets on the air. And I want to sort of wrap up the ABC section and get into new media. But you have this incredible investment. And now the network spends more money marketing the show, which is also an enormous cost. And one thing that people may not realize in the job that someone like Lloyd has when you're a network president is that every day, especially when the season begins in September, it's like when you get I don't know if you have the same system here, but you get your report card from school, right? So every day is a report card. and you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're waiting for those ratings to come in. And that moment of, I've spent $13 million, we've probably spent $5 or $6 million advertising this show. I'm going to get these ratings. What's that moment like, and what did you feel when you got it?
The moment was more surreal because I had already been fired with all of my executives. My friend Alex Wallow, who was my boss, who I adore, we all knew for months towards the end that none of us were going to survive this, and he would refer to the oncoming slaughter as the broom job. And so I was, at that point, in between ABC and Yahoo, and I remember the day I actually had my parents over to dinner that night on the day the ratings came out. I remember when the ratings came out that morning, I was in shock because ABC had not had a hit drama in about 10 years, a big hit drama. They had The Practice, but The Practice, while it was like Alias, The Practice was like a double. They hadn't had a home run. And Lost had become such a lightning rod in so many respects. And when I saw the number, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. It worked. And a little anecdote. So that night, my parents are there, and I'm in a strange mood all day. I mean, you learn how to sort of be very stoic when you go through sort of a public firing, which is what happens when you lose those jobs. I mean, you really, you got to suck it up and learn how to take a punch. And the doorbell rings at about 8 o'clock at night, and there's a package. And so I get the package, and I open it up, and there's a gorgeous, huge silver frame of the plane with notes on the photo from JJ, Damon Lindelof, and Brian Burke that are the most unbelievable, touching notes. And that was one of the most amazing moments of my career. It was surreal when it came and how it came, and I look back at it now, and it's nothing but a great experience. I mean, it's when you're involved in any way with a hit, and Avi and Giddy and others are experiencing that now with Homeland. It's a miracle. It is a miracle when you have a hit.
Jeff Sagansky, when he was at CBS, used to say that hits were accidents.
They are. The number of things that can go wrong from the moment that you have an idea. The first script that came in was unreadable. I mean, and then you've got to get it picked up. And by the way, it's not like you sit there and yours is the only opinion that matters, even if you're running the network. You've got your head of drama. You've got all the executives. You've got the showrunners. I mean, you've got 1 million people weighing in. You've got to cast it right. You've got to market it right. You have to put it in the right time slot. You have to, I mean, you have to hope that there's no bad, that on the night, that you're not preempted because something happens. I can't tell you the number of things that could go wrong. And so when you actually see that you have a breakout hit, it's like, it's a shock. And so you're lucky if you have one in your career. And it's a magical thing when it happens, and you can't expect it to happen very often.
So all things must pass, and now you're offered this incredible opportunity to transition from a traditional media company to Yahoo. Mm-hmm. What was that like, making that decision, trying to go, what essentially was being a pioneer in a lot of ways, because no one knew anything, right?
Including me.
No one.
About digital.
Right?
Yeah.
And what was it like? Talk about that a little bit, and what was like that first holy shit moment when you were there? If you'll pardon my language.
At that point, I was not very keen on going back into a big company. I had had a very tumultuous experience at Disney, And going back to another a big corporation, I really don't have the personality for it, quite honestly. And it was not something I wanted to do. But when I met with Terry Semel and he walked me through what his vision was for Yahoo, I felt that this was one of the truly remarkable opportunities to help really establish the dominant digital media company going forward. And but I didn't know the first thing about the internet. I mean, I didn't know a single thing. And I remember my very first day at Yahoo. I had to fly up all the time to Sunnyvale, where Yahoo's based. And I had dinner my first night with my head engineer, a guy named lovely man, Barath Kadaba. And we went out to dinner, and I said, okay, Barath, what's the internet? I'll tell you what I think it is, and you tell me if I'm right. And Barath is like, oh, my God. And I'm like, and like, how do these pictures get on the computers? Like, it feels like someone's holding up some cards or something. I mean, how the heck does this work? Now, by the way, I never knew how television worked. It was like a miracle, the way this, right? Who knows how television works? But the one thing I swore to myself when I went to Yahoo was, I am going to learn this from the ground up. Because I knew that nobody that had my background in traditional media had learned this yet. And if I learned it, regardless of how this all played out, do I have a little something here? Regardless,
that was a Larry David moment.
Regardless of how it all played out, it was going to be enormously valuable. And I decided I was going to ask every question, no matter how stupid it might seem. And I did. And what I found was that it was amazing. First of all, when I would meet with my various teams, because I oversaw all the different media properties of Yahoo. So it was news, finance, entertainment, games, television, everything. And I would sit with all of these, with all the people. Maybe there were 30 people in news. And I'd say, okay, so what audience, so what's the demographic that we're programming for? And I got like blank looks. Finally, someone says, what do you mean by demographic? And another person says, what do you mean by development? Somebody else says, you mean programming, like writing code? They had no idea. It was like the old days of television where we were only looking at household ratings. Here you had this new medium that was capable of such precision in how things are programmed, and you had engineers running the place. That no one with our background in media and programming had been brought into these places, other than Terry, but he sat at the very, very top. He wasn't messing around with this stuff. And I saw, oh my God, none of these people understand the first thing about content at all, about making a rich experience, about design. I would ask questions about design, and I'm like, well, they were like, well, why do you need design? I mean, this is a utilitarian type medium. I go, no, it's not. I said, it's utilitarian because that's all you guys are doing now. You don't think people are going to want rich design on their sites? No. But the holy shit moment was I was in a big senior staff meeting of all the senior executives at Yahoo. And some guy comes in to show us a new site that Yahoo was about to launch called Yahoo 360. And this was going to be their Facebook killer. This was in the very early stages of Facebook. Maybe some of you here heard of Yahoo 360. That was their social media site. It didn't last long. And they projected up on the screen, and I noticed, and I had been noticing this on most of our sites, it was narrow. It didn't use the entire, by then I knew what a browser was. It didn't use the whole browser. It certainly didn't use the whole
What's a browser?
Monitor. I'll tell you on the way home. So it literally just used the middle of the screen. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Oh, am I really going to ask this question to every senior executive? Okay, I'm going to ask it. I raise my hand. Why do we have margins on all of our sites? I call them margins. Why do we have the margins? What's with the margins? I don't get it. I mean, this is exactly how I said it. I said, it would be like when we were doing Lost, we said, hey, let's just use the middle of the TV. We won't use the edges. We won't use the right third. We won't use the left third. We'll only use the center of the TV. 10 seconds, silence. And then the COO of the company says, can someone answer the man's question? And an engineer pipes up, well, that's how we've always done it. And another engineer pipes up and goes, well, Mr. Show Business Guy with the great Apple monitor that nobody else has, you know, Yahoo has to program for everybody, even the people with, you know, the crummy Dell monitors that don't have the same resolution, and that impacts, you know, how much data we can put on. You give me this detailed explanation. I go, well, don't we have some super duper monitor sniffer thingy, which is exactly what I called it, okay, that can tell what kind of monitor you have and then sort of size the site accordingly? And another engineer pipes up and goes, yeah, we could do that. And I walk out of this meeting and I go, oh my God, this is where the bar is. These guys don't know you're supposed to use the whole screen. And I must have 100 of these stories. Now, in fairness to Yahoo, by that point, I had hired a whole bunch of the best executives from AOL, from MSN. It was the exact same on all of them. In fact, if you now go on MSN later today, check out our site Wonderwall, and then go take a look at MSN Entertainment. And you will see, and by the way, make your browser big, make your browser small. Look what happens with Wonderwall, and look what happens with MSN Entertainment. Nobody was looking at this medium as, no one was programming it. No one was designing it. No one was molding content on it in a way to titillate the consumer, to allow them to discover, to use design as a way of making you stay longer. They didn't care about you staying longer. And by the way, it's only now that they're even starting to think about that. Now, there's a reason for it, which I won't get into because it'll sop up too much time, but it has to do with search.
But that raises my next question, which you touched on a little bit. So ultimately, what were the lessons that you took from your experience at Yahoo that you've brought with you to Braun, in which is, you've now gone into the entrepreneurial part of your life? But what lessons did you learn from that type of experience?
Right.
Because I think
that's a great question. The first lesson I've learned over my career is you often say to yourself, oh, I'm sure they thought of that. Wrong. You think that these people at these jobs and companies, they're so smart. Of course they've thought of that. Wrong. Okay? Or maybe they've thought of it, but they never did anything about it. And so the most important thing I think you have to do throughout your career is you can never get too sucked into anything. You have to keep, you have this in your business all the time, but you're reading a client script, whatever it is. You know, if a big client of yours sends you a script, who's a big client, who makes a ton of money, who is sought after by every single network, you read this thing, it's like, I've got to like this thing. And you can very easily, by the way, talk yourself into having liked it when you read it, because you have to like it. When the reality is, and we've all been there, people who are unbelievably talented, et cetera, et cetera. For people, I could walk you through chapter and verse people that have monster hit shows right now, where I've done 5 shows with them over the years that were unwatchable. You have to maintain a certain level of objectivity and pull back so that you can take a look with objective eyes and trust your instincts. And if you see something's not being done, then do it. You can investigate why, et cetera, but trusting your own instincts trusting your instinct that this is a show, if you believe that something's, if you're in this business and you believe with every fiber of your being that something will work, then you have to do it, no matter how many people tell you that it won't work. Now, here's the truth of it. Very often, if I have an idea for a show and it doesn't work, and there have been plenty of those, we just don't talk about them. But my partner Gail occasionally mentions them. I never believe it didn't work because it was a bad idea. I believe it didn't work because we screwed it up. Somewhere in the process where all the miracles have to happen, they didn't happen. We didn't cast it right. We didn't execute it right. We didn't schedule it right. Whatever it may be.
Well, that's
we messed it up.
That's one of the questions I'm always asked when I come here, because I do have the pleasure of having worked with so many incredibly talented Israeli creators like Giddy or Hagai Levy or Ron Leshem. Some of these people are incredibly talented, and sometimes these shows work. With Hatufin into Homeland, everything was just perfect. I mean,
perfect. Miracle.
Alchemy. It just
you look at it now. Mandy Patinkin was a guy everybody was afraid to cast. This guy.
It's phenomenal.
They just were.
He's crazy.
Difficult.
Crazy.
Difficult. But can you imagine the show without him? No.
That's an example of just everything working perfectly. And as we know, most of the time things don't work perfectly. And we've been involved in some shows. And, we did a show with Adir Miller, which was Traffic Light, which was a successful comedy here, which had all the makings of being a successful show there. And one great story, then we're going to move back, is, we had the show.
Talk about Malcolm.
Well, that's a whole other story.
But that's another example of a show that nobody thought Malcolm in the Middle had any chance at all. And Rick and my partner Gail Berman are the one responsible for getting that thing.
I represented a writer who was a very talented writer that no one wanted to be in business with at all because he had a reputation of being difficult. And even though he was incredibly talented, and he came to me, this was like 1997, and he came to me and said, I have an idea for a show about a family that has a genius son. He's very gifted. And I want to shoot this single camera film, in other words, not in front of an audience as a typical sitcom. And I want the kid to be the main character, and he's going to break the fourth wall and talk to the camera. And, he's the lead, the kid lead. And I said, Linwood, we're breaking every rule. This goes to your Lost conversation. I said, you're breaking every rule. You're child lead, no one does it. Single camera film hasn't been done in 15 years. Kid in the lead, it's just impossible. If we pitch this show to every network, they won't even validate our parking. So write it. If you believe in it, write it. And he wrote a genius script, and it was like in the same situation in his homeland in Hatufin. It was alchemy. Everything just worked perfectly, and that's again challenging assumptions. But I want to move back, Lloyd. Okay. I want to move back to you and into your new world. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I've noticed, here we are in this country that has been so incredibly successful with startups in technology and in new media. Probably next to the United States, the most successful, certainly percentage-wise, in terms of having these entrepreneurial
You can only compare it really to Silicon Valley.
It's really incredible, right? So, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or whether it's, many other these, whatever entrepreneurial venture, whether it's Braun, it always seems to be entrepreneurs with, that move into this particular medium, into this space, this digital world, faster and successfully than the major media companies. So why is a company like Disney or News Corp or CBS, or why are the major, Time Warner, with all the assets they have, why are they so slow to get into this space?
Okay. That's a great question. I want to use a quote which I have to credit to Tim Armstrong, who is the CEO of AOL, actually, and does a wonderful job with that company. Tim said to me about 2 months ago, every media company is in a turnaround, they just don't know it yet. And he's 100% right. First of all, most of these media companies now are 2 times, 3 times bigger than they really should be in terms of overhead, infrastructure. The brick and mortar of these companies, which has been built over 50 or 60 years in a completely different media landscape. Once you build layer upon layer of infrastructure, it's almost impossible to take it apart.
Does it stifle creativity?
Here's what it does.
Entrepreneurialism?
Yes, it does. And the reason it does is it limits your ability to be able to really invest in these new areas because you're constantly looking at a way to downsize because you know that, if we have 60,000 people in our company, well, if we were building the company today and we knew exactly what we wanted the company to be, how many people would we really have and in what divisions for this company to really sail on all cylinders? It might be half or a third as much. And by the way, the company might be more productive, make more money. Well, what does that do to the economics? Even a company like Yahoo, and again, I'm not picking on Yahoo. This exact same thing could be said of MSN, and it was certainly true of AOL until Tim really went after that. What I could not believe, and one of the things we did in our company was, when I sat with that news group and I saw 30 people, they were product people, designers, engineers, sales, editorial, all siloed in news. And let's say they had 30 types of ad units that they would sell. And then I'd meet with the entertainment, the movie group, and they'd have editors and sales and product and design. Same thing. They'd have another whole infrastructure just for that, by the way, with a different platform. Every single media property had a different platform. None of the platforms spoke to each other. And their sales units, they maybe had 28 sales units, of which 5 were the same as news. Now you went to another one, and the same story again. So I did like a big strategic white paper for them after I was there about 6 months, and maybe this is why they love me so much. On the cover of it, I did this like Venn diagram representative of all the platforms of the media group, and it looked like like a 2-year-old had scribbled on a piece of paper 100 lines in different directions. I'm like, this is a diagram of our platforms. We should have one platform here from which everything grows. And by the way, if we did, instead of having 1,000 people, we'd need 200, 250. So let's go back to the media companies. If you have overbuilt the company in all these areas, and you don't really understand the digital business, because remember, none of us who grew up in that business do. I didn't. And I know most of the guys, not all, but most of the guys running these things, they don't. They don't really understand it. In fact, we had the head of one of the big media companies in our office 2 weeks ago and showed him around. And I was talking to him I said to him, here's the thing. If someone comes in and says to you that you have a new initiative you want and you need to staff it, and someone says, you need 100 engineers in order to do this. The head of the media company, CEO would say, 100 engineers? Yeah, you need 100 engineers. Really? Why? Because you need 100 engineers. All right. Or if they came in with the exact same thing and said, you need 3 engineers. Really? We only need 3 engineers? Yeah, you only need 3 engineers. Great. They have no idea whether you need 100 or whether you need 3. Now, if you went in and said, you need a writing staff of 20 people, I'd say, get out of here. You don't need a writing staff of 20 people. 6, 8. You know every other piece of the business cold. But digital, you have no idea. How do I make money? What's the difference in search advertising and display advertising? How does this work? No one knows. And so if you don't understand any of that, you're going to spend $10, $15 million building out an infrastructure on a business you don't really understand? The reality is it's just not going to happen. And this is why we're sitting here today. When I got into business with my partner, Gail, and I walked her through what I thought our digital business could be, she looked at me and said, how is it possible that no one's doing this? I said, because they're not. And I would walk her through all of this. And we're sitting here 6 years later, and now Gail gives the speech. Because I thought maybe we had a 2 or 3 year head start. There isn't a single company in Los Angeles that is doing anything remotely near what we're doing. And it's not because we're such geniuses. It's because they don't even know where to begin.
So here you are with creating content. You have, I don't know, how many, 8, 9 sites? I mean,
we have 10 sites. And 5 more coming. We don't like calling them sites, though, because, you know, the website,
they're more platforms.
The website, we call them brands because even television shows are going to be brands. And these brands are going to exist across, the really successful ones are going to exist across all platforms.
Okay, so here's my question to you, directly relating to the content, because we have content creators out here. What do you look for in terms of content on a digital basis as opposed to on a traditional basis?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to, the amazing thing for me is when people come in, they may be friends, whatever they may be, and they pitch me something, and I say, okay, what's the business? How do you make money? Ari said this the other day. How do you make money from that? It's amazing. 9 out of 10 times, they don't know. They just think, well, if it works, it'll make money. This is the mistake so many people make. That's not true. No.
You're saying Ari was wrong?
No, Ari was right, okay, about this. He was wrong about
we
one
know. That's another
he was
story.
wrong about one other thing. So how is it going to make money? And we'll hear, the thing about the digital area is there's a new idea coming at us every 15 minutes, either from the outside or we'll come up with one. And one of the things I learned at Yahoo is you have to be very disciplined about what you go after, because otherwise you're going to spin your wheels and you're going to be doing a million things and you're going to be doing none of them well. And this is very hard for Gail and I because we're used to doing a million things and we've managed big organizations and we think we're capable of doing it. But the reality is we're not. You can only do a certain number of things really, really well. And on the digital side, we look at 2 or 3 things. One is there a consumer proposition here that is unique? Will people go to, consume, use this? Will that happen? Is nobody else doing it the way we could do it? It's got to start at that because, and you got to answer that question yes. Most of the time you don't. And if you do answer that question yes, and by the way, it doesn't mean, for instance, when we did our celebrity news site, Wonderwall, it wasn't like the world was saying we've got to have another celebrity news site. It wasn't like Gail and I said, oh, we've got to be in that business.
I wondered about that when you guys did
okay. You want to know why we did it? I'll tell you why we did it. Because when I was at Yahoo and I saw we were going to be able to do very little, the first thing we decided to do was OMG, which is their big celebrity news site. So why do we pick that? Because the key to these portals are their home pages. That's where all the traffic comes from. That's a dirty little secret. They're all about the home page. And there's big fights inside these companies about who gets on the home page to have their content shown inside the company. So all the different sites inside the company are battling to be on the home page. And who controls the home page? A bunch of programmers, by the way, most of whom rose up as engineers. It's getting a little better now. And so that was the only way you're going to get traffic, unless you had celebrity content. That clicks like crazy. So if you have celebrity content, there's no arguments. So I'm like, I'll do celebrity content.
Okay, so what about...
But then... I want you okay, so let me just mention one other point, because this will really highlight something. So Yahoo launches OMG, And it's the most successful celebrity site multiple times over of anything else. It's doing like 25 million uniques a month. Crazy. When we finally meet with Microsoft after we had established our core infrastructure for digital, and they said to us, we'll do one thing with you, pick something. And we looked at the MSN network. They didn't have a celebrity site. And I said to myself, how is it possible? These guys are sitting there, and they see that Yahoo just launched 2 years ago a celebrity news site, and they're still sending their celebrity traffic all over the place instead of having a hub which you can create a brand around and monetize and turn into a big business, and they still haven't done it. And so we decided to do the same thing for them, and we decided it won't be tawdry, because you don't get advertisers if it's tawdry. Also, I can't be getting calls from Ari and Rick asking me why we're writing about their clients in some kind of way, and we never have. And Wonderwall did 1 billion page views 2 months ago. We do between 800 and 1,000,000,001 page views a month. We do about 18 million uniques a month. And we took a business, we do right now probably 15 to 20 times the amount of revenue in the celebrity news category that MSN did the year before we launched Wonderwall.
Talk about a different type of content, all right? So is there, because I have this debate in my office every other week because I run a meeting in this area. Is there a true future in scripted digital content?
Yes.
And I don't mean...
Yes, but under a different business model.
I don't mean the Netflix full
No, I know
series.
what you mean. Webisodes.
Exactly.
Yes, there is. But...
As an incubator?
No, well, no. The reason it hasn't happened yet are, A, we just talked about how, first of all, the technology companies have no idea how to make compelling scripted content. So it's not going to come out of there. The media companies do, but the economics make no sense for them.
Correct.
Also, people haven't learned yet how to make these things very cheaply. And you cannot spend a lot of money. The key to being successful in the digital area is you have to learn how to scale and how to have an infrastructure that is very, very lean and mean. It doesn't mean it can't look great. It means that you have to be mindful of how much you're spending, how much revenue can come in, so that you have a real business out of it.
Can you monetize it? That leads to the question of why is advertising coming slowly?
I believe today it's very difficult to monetize it, which is why we don't do it. But I believe that the landscape is going to change dramatically over the next 5 years. Television is going to change dramatically over the next 5 years.
This is not for Giddy. He makes too much money in television.
Well, okay? It's not. But what Giddy is not going to be doing television shows. Giddy is going to be doing scripted shows. And those scripted shows are going to exist. Guys, television is going to be nothing but a big iPad. When you buy a Samsung for 3 years and you take it out of the box, or you buy an Apple television, if they haven't then, you take it out of the box. When you plug it in, right now when you do it, you have cable or you have satellite, and the channel guide comes up. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to plug it in, and you're going to see a home screen with apps. If it's a Samsung TV, they're going to be Android apps. And you know what those apps are going to be? ESPN's going to be an app. AMC's going to be an app. Keshet's going to be an app. CNN's going to be an app. Wonderwall may be an app. And the consumer is going to be able to subscribe directly to the content provider. They're not going to need Comcast or Time Warner or DirecTV. And for those of you who have kids, my oldest kids are in their 20s. They don't want to pay for cable. They watch like 4 shows, 5 shows. They'll watch it on Netflix, or they'll buy it on iTunes. They're not going to spend $150 a month for cable. And now there's a lot of things that have to happen. There's going to be huge business battles before this happens. But you can't stop this train from where it's going. We're all going to be able to get directly what we want. And people are going to be prepared to pay for it, because instead of paying the $150 a month that you pay now for cable or DirecTV, and
in the States,
you think it's free. It's not free. You just paid $150 a month on your cable bill. Okay? Now you're only going to have to pay $50. But guess what? Or $70, or $90, or $100. But you're only going to get what you want. You're not going to get the stuff you don't want. And how that content exists sure, you're going to be able to watch Homeland on any device you want, but then there's going to be other kinds of content that you watch that maybe will be shaped differently based on whatever platform you're watching it on. Conan's show, Conan may not have his entire show on an iPhone. Yeah, you could watch the whole show, or you could watch the iPhone version of Conan's show, which will be more designed for that tiny screen and that medium, and somebody who doesn't want to spend an hour watching it, but really isn't going to spend more than 8 to 10 minutes watching it. And that's not happening yet, but that is all going to happen. And webisodes are going to be part of that experience, but you can't pay for them today through advertising.
So
that's the problem.
Will I be able to watch in the States The Mentalist on Sunday night at 10 o'clock? By the way, I never watch Sunday night at 10 o'clock because I'm watching Homeland, but that's besides the point. But will I be able to watch the 10 o'clock show on CBS if I want to watch the 10 o'clock show on CBS? Or will I have to?
You're going to have a lot of choices, Ricky. You're either going to still have you'll always have satellite, or what, you have satellite now?
Yes.
Okay. You'll always have satellite. You're always going to get everything. All right. But Sally, your daughter, may decide, you know what? Yeah, she's going to have CBS, given that she works there. But she may decide, I don't really need ABC. I don't watch any of their shows.
And the people here will have a Keshet app or a Channel 10 app, or will they be watching?
They're going to have a choice. You're going to have a choice. I believe, this is all my opinion, of whether you want to have a massive a provider, such as a cable provider or a satellite provider, where you get to have everything or mostly everything, or whether you want to just consume, since every television is going to be internet enabled, and every television is going to, and the quality of what you're watching is going to be as good, if not better, than what you get on cable. You're going to be able, if you want, to avoid all of that, and ultimately, as these walls start breaking down, go directly to the content providers, the studios. So Warner Brothers, for example, will be able to have an offering where maybe they'll have one offering that, they'll be able to have TNT, and they'll have TBS, and they'll have, all separate apps. Or you can get a bundled Warner app for more money, and you'll get all of those Warner stations. It's going to be broken down. There's going to be no one way to do this. There's going to be a myriad of ways, and you're going to be able to get live streaming on your iPad, and that's going to be yet another distribution mechanism. What's not going to happen anymore, what's going to slowly start to fade away, is the notion that you have to either get satellite or DirecTV, and you're going to have to pay $150 a month, and you're going to get 1,000 channels, even though you watch 7.
That's me. All right, Shira, the boss, tells us our time is coming to an end. I thought it might be a good idea. Don't be mad, Shira, because we're here and we always get asked lots of questions. Maybe we have time for just a couple of questions from the audience. And then, Shira, when you tell me stop, I'll stop. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Right here. What year was it that you entered Yahoo?
It was about 6 years ago. So 2006, approximately.
In the back. Is that Josh? Stand up, please, Josh, so we can hear you.
Wait a minute. Entered Yahoo? I'm sorry, 8 years ago. Because I've been in this company 6 years.
This is a question that comes out of self-interest because Josh works for Warner Brothers.
I know.
So be sensitive to that.
It's going to be brutal, because there's nothing harder than to downsize companies, and unfortunately, many of them, there's a part, the business side of you says, well, how do you, is there, you look at what the company really should look like today, you compare that to what it does look like today, and you make the cuts. But given where the global economy is and everything else, how do you fire 20,000 people, 25,000 people? It's completely unrealistic.
And on the other side of that, these companies are making enormous profits right now. The article that you and I spoke about yesterday, Warner Brothers Television is record profits right now. CBS, under Leslie Moonves, is having enormous success. So somehow, I believe, Lloyd, that those companies will exist. They'll exist slightly differently. They're still going to be content providers, and you're still going to ultimately be in the distribution business in a different way.
So what I think the reality of how it's going to happen is it's going to happen gradually. I think most of the CEOs privately would agree, maybe not all. And so bit by bit, these companies are going to transform. And there are CEOs like Bob Iger, for example, who is very sophisticated
Disney,
in business,
right.
in digital. I remember when I'd go into his office at 7:30 in the morning, I'd be at ABC, and I'd get in early sometimes, and he was always in early, and this is over 10 years ago, 12 years ago. He'd be on Yahoo before anybody was even using Yahoo, 15 years ago.
That's very unusual.
And so it will happen. We had a huge advantage in that we got to start a company from scratch, and we knew what it wanted to look like, and so we could create the infrastructure. We have 120 people in our company, and we have a big TV business. We have, including assistants, 6 people, 7 people who do TV. That's it. Why? We don't think the business can justify, given where it's going, more people than that. So we're not going to, we're going to live within our means. That's the number of executives. And meanwhile, we've got 100 and something executives doing digital. But we'll have on Wonderwall, we have 7 dedicated people on Wonderwall. If you went to our competitors in the media world that have celebrity news sites, 150.
Any other questions? In the back, yes. Okay, we'll finish you and then we'll coming back to you. Okay. Yes, sir. You were speaking. No, stand up. No.
Why did they hire me in the first? Well, I wasn't hired for ABC in the first place. I was hired actually to be at Disney's television studio. And a year in, they merged the television studio and the network together. And I somehow survived a very difficult, ugly corporate battle that existed at that point, and it was a miracle. There were so many different ways I could have, not survived. And, it's part of my job was to rebuild. But there's not a lot of patience in those jobs.
There's an expression in the United States, and I shudder to use a baseball metaphor because I don't know how many people understand that, but baseball managers, they say, are hired to be fired. And it's the same way, ultimately, with network presidents.
Although I never thought I was going to be fired until the last 4 months.
One of my predecessors at a different talent agency, because agents tend to be very stable and stay not stable emotionally, but stable professionally and stay at the same place. And one particular very famous television agent who's now retired, said to some network president who was giving him a hard time, he said, "I worked with your predecessor, and I'm going to work with your successor."
I know this man. I know
Okay,
this man.
over here we had a question. Great question. Great question.
Yeah, it did in the beginning. Now, not at all. Our digital business is, probably 5 times the size of our television business, and next year will be maybe 15 times the size of our digital business. But in the beginning, we absolutely used our television business to finance the digital side. In terms of your first question on how should content creators finance on the digital side, I'm not sure you should. What I recommend is actually what Ari suggested yesterday, where get stuff out there, make it dirt cheap, and get it out there, but do not spend a lot of your own money creating content, scripted content for the digital world because it's not ready for it yet. I mean, but yet maybe it'll become a format that, someone, maybe one of us would see it or somebody else would see it and see how to be able to take that and turn it into something else that can be monetized. I'm not saying that there's a little bit of money to be made, but you can't point to, I could give you countless examples of some scripted things that have appeared online that have done great numbers. No money.
We're hoping, and we believe in our company, that eventually it will.
It will.
And
it will.
And that great content ultimately gets found. The challenge, and one of the questions we've been exploring, is how to monetize that. And it's coming slowly, but ultimately
it's going to have to come from the consumer as opposed from the advertiser.
And a great content creator. Yes, sir.
Question. Obviously, you talked about the future of TV is going to be a huge iPad on the wall. And this is something also that Braun was talking about yesterday, that all the major networks are going to be moving more to the digital. My question to you is, where do you see linear TV 15, 20 years from now?
Great question. Does it exist?
Yes. It absolutely exists. I think the biggest difference is going to be already people's viewing habits. The way we watch TV has changed dramatically over the last 3 years. We used to watch TV where, especially my generation, turn on the TV, take the remote, look for something to watch. If I like a show, every Wednesday night I watch that show. Not anymore. Now someone tells me, have you seen Homeland? Well, Homeland's a bad example because I can't get it online. Have you seen Downton Abbey? No. You got to watch Downton Abbey. So I go to Netflix and I watch season 1 of Downton Abbey with my wife, and I watch 8 episodes in 2 days. It's like reading. It's like a binge experience. And then I'm like, oh my God, I got to get season 2. Oh, it's not on Netflix? What the heck? Then it's on Apple TV.
Go ahead.
There's an important point I want to make here. So I'll watch season 2 on Apple TV. All right, I got no more episodes to watch. I know the date season 3 is going to premiere in the U.S. in January. Okay, I think January 16th. Could be wrong by a day, but it's around there. Okay, I'll be watching it live. So now they have me. They wouldn't have had me had I not gone through the Netflix experience and the iTunes experience, because these are highly serialized shows that are very hard for you to catch up with. The same is true with Dexter. The same is true with Mad Men. Every one of these, I went back to the pilot, and then that was the only show I watched till I got current. It was like reading a book. And so I believe the networks are going to have to change how they program, because it's not going to, people don't want to wait every week to be able to watch a show when you already have the experience of seeing, I can watch 3 in a night. Do we go to a movie on Saturday night, or do we watch 3 episodes of Homeland that we haven't watched it on the DVR? I think we'd rather watch the 3 episodes of Homeland most of the time.
This is a very generational and demographically motivated issue. You know, and it's probably the biggest issue in television in the United States right now because, you know, advertiser-supported television, which is everything except HBO and Showtime, essentially, you know, gets paid by advertisers. And if people are not watching advertising, the networks aren't getting paid. And if the networks aren't getting paid, the studios who are making the shows aren't getting paid. And then my clients aren't getting paid, and that makes me unhappy, you know. So, but, you know, but they're watching shows differently, as Lloyd was saying. My kids watch shows, they binge view, right? They watch 5 episodes in a row. They don't watch a show when it's particularly scheduled. I think one of the things that we're finding with Homeland, which is because it's so much in the cultural zeitgeist, is a disproportionate amount of people are currently watching it on, you know, right online on on television on Sunday night. But that's unusual.
2 points, and then I'll shut up on this. The 2 things I think that are going to change are, first of all, fewer and fewer people are going to be watching live, or even live plus 3. Right. Maybe even or live plus 7, all right? That's where most of the money comes in for the networks now. It's all from advertising, and the advertising is measured live plus 3 today. People are watching television more than ever. They're just not watching it live. The problem is we're not monetizing in the television industry yet all those eyeballs as well on Netflix and Apple TV and these other platforms as we have been monetizing it through sales and live TV where we've been getting premium CPMs. There's going to have to be a shift where, since a disproportionate number of people are going to start watching these shows later, where the revenue now comes from exploitation in those areas, much more so relative to sales. And I think the network,
the biggest issue
in the
television industry,
a brutal issue to fix, but it has to be fixed, and it's fixable. The other thing I think networks are going to have to do, and I actually said this to Kevin Riley a few weeks ago, who runs Fox. If I were running a network in another lifetime, I would right now I would take some shots at scheduling shows completely differently. If I had Homeland, for example, on a network, by the way, the same might be true of on a cable network, I would shoot the whole season, 10 episodes, let's say 13, whatever it is. I'd air it 10 straight nights and create an event out of it where people can watch the entire season, because that's how people are going to want to watch this stuff. They are not going to want... By the way, it's frustrating as hell having to wait. I can't believe I missed last night's episode. You don't want to wait. We're in a world of immediate gratification. And it made sense when networks were running a certain way to schedule. You were scheduling over 52 weeks, et cetera, but it's all different now. And they're going to have to rethink how they schedule shows. We need to stop.
One last question. Right here. Non-scripted television is here to stay.
It's only going to grow.
It's not going anywhere. It is a fundamental staple of every network. It is, you know, it's interesting how it started, but there's no question that it's not going away. It is economically, advantageous to a network because most of those shows are less expensive than scripted shows. But more importantly, it was a generational thing that brought the non-scripted business to such prominence or to the place it is, because young kids who are not young anymore, people who are now in their 30s, grew up watching shows like Real World, okay? And they grew up watching, ultimately, great storytelling that was non-scripted. And there's no difference between scripted and non-scripted. A successful non-scripted show is great storytelling. I'd like to say, give the example of American Idol. American Idol in the beginning of the season is a comedy. At the end of the season, it's high drama. But you're invested in the characters. And that's what makes great television.
That's the key to what Rick just said is the key to everything. Unscripted, scripted, no one thinks about what that is when they're watching. You look at any hit show, characters. Getting attached, falling in love with, caring about the characters, that is the whole deal. And it doesn't matter what form it is.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.